And if I can just say what an honor it is to be doing this conversation with Pavanji. Pavanji is my senior in every respect, as you said rightly. He was the director, of the Nehru Center many years ago, and according to most people, perhaps the finest director there ever was. And one of the challenges he threw at me when I went to meet him in Delhi before coming here was that you have to better my record. And I'm like, okay, that's going to be damn difficult.
Easily done.
And where I respect him even more is as an author and as a scholar. I'm a Shaivite, and what he has done with Adi Shankaracharya ji, those of us who are Shaivites, many don't realize the seminal importance of Adi Shankaracharya ji to Shaivite thought and to Hindu thought, actually. Much of the core philosophical, the deeper expressions that we know today come from Adi Shankaracharya ji, and Pavanji did a wonderful, wonderful book on it. I would strongly recommend it to all of you. Do check it out. And now he's here with a fascinating book, with someone who actually, who lived in, one of my roots, actually. My father's family is from Kashi, from Banaras. In fact, my grandfather used to live very close to Tulsi Ghat, and this is his greatest ode to Lord Ram. No such thing as too much marketing. I'm showing the book around. Everyone please go and buy it. And it is an analysis of what Goswami Tulsidas ji did in the 16th century. When he relooked at the Valmiki Ramayana, many aren't aware that he didn't just retell the Valmiki Ramayana, he actually reinterpreted it in many places. It wasn't just in terms of the language, it was in many other aspects as well. Pavanji says very rightly that Goswami Tulsidas ji's Ramcharitmanas is probably the greatest among the devotional versions of the Ramayan. So I thought, Pavanji, we could start, I could start by asking you on where these devotional texts grew from, because Ramcharitmanas, yes, is among the most famous, but it wasn't actually among the earliest. There was the Kritivashi Ramayan. Some say Kamban Ramayan, the Tamil version, was perhaps the oldest of the devotional versions of the Ramayan as compared to the Valmiki Ramayan. What are your thoughts on this? How did it grow into what Goswami Tulsidas ji did in the era that he wrote it in?
Well, thank you very much, Amish, for those very kind words of appreciation. And let me tell you, they are completely reciprocated. I see in you a truly pioneering director of the Nehru Center, and of course a writer whom I greatly admire. You are a role model to many more, and Payal was talking about time management. I don't think this country has seen a more prolific writer than you have, or a more successful one in terms of both the quality and the number of books you sell. So it's a pleasure, of course, talking to my young friend. And let me say, I go down the nostalgia street because your background, I think, is what my office used to be.
Yes.
Right here. And in the background, the clay library of Sanskrit, I can see the blue books at the back. So, in a sense, I'm transported 2 decades earlier to my stint in London. So, I'm absolutely at home, therefore. Now, your question about the many Ramayans. The first thing I want to say, this is something you'll appreciate. Whereas the truth is one of Professor Rajiv Malhotra calls it anxiety over chaos. But what is chaos to them is merely the multifolded, multiple manifestations of the one essential truth which you are familiar with, which I know, that there is that one cosmic pulsating consciousness that pervades all reality, which is one. Now, therefore, it's entirely in keeping with Hinduism that instead of one Bible or one Quran, as happens with Abrahamic faiths, uh, in Hinduism, for that very text which some treat as a Bible, or they do it because they revere Ram, not only as an epic hero, but as actually standing and symbolic for the divine. For that one book, there are many versions. You are familiar with A.K. Ramanujan's essay of 300 Ramayana.
Yes.
But all of them essentially are variations of the theme. In other words, one swara and its many vibrations. And therefore, whether it's Kamban or whether it's the Adhyatma Ramayan or the progenitor of them all, the Valmiki Ramayan, my view is that we should look at each of them both as something unto themselves, worthy of examination as an autarkic work, and also part of a larger tradition of which Maryada Purushottam Ram is the center of an epic. Now the variations can probably often even take great liberties with the original story. But that doesn't mean that they are not talking of a basic central theme which is about Ram. And I see all of these versions in that light. The difference with Tulsidas was that at least for North India, he created not in classical Sanskrit but in Awadhi. And there was a whole tradition of the democratization of Sanskrit religious literature but particularly religious literature into the so-called quote-unquote vernaculars, although I don't like that word. It happened with the Radha Krishna lore, with Chandidas, with Bihari, with Surdas, taking it into Brij, into Maithili, into Bengali. And it happened in the case of Tulsidas into Braj, into Awadhi. Now, why did he write in Awadhi was because, of course, he knew Sanskrit. And he could have written perhaps in Sanskrit. But there is both fact and lore behind the fact that he chose Awadhi because it was the language of the common man. And that is why it has been called as the Bible of most people who are Hindus in North India. So Tulsidas' Ramayan I chose, if you ask me, because that is what I have grown up with. Perhaps so have you, and it doesn't matter whether you are a Shaivite or not.
Yeah.
Let me say, Tulsidas completely and effortlessly bridges, if at all there is ever a schism in Hinduism, which there is not. The bridge between Shaivite school and the Vaishnav school, because Shiva is the one who narrates the story, Shiva is the one who venerates Ram, and Ram probably voices the most evocative hymn to Shiva. So there is no difference between the two.
Wonderful way to approach it. And you, in effect, because one of the thoughts that one of the questions that I had was, you've kind of referred to it in your answer on why you picked Goswami Tulsidasji's Ramcharitmanas. Why did you not pick, say, the Valmiki Ramayana, the original itself? Or is that something you intend to take up later? Because you did refer to it that this is most seminal, perhaps, in North India.
No,
but
I don't make a comparison. I don't want to make a comparison because I think Valmiki's Ramayana was definitely a remarkable text in terms of its Sanskrit, the literature, sheer literature, and the outlining of an epic, of an Panikula. of an epic. But Tulsidas' Ramcharitmanas also fascinated me because apart from telling the story of Maryada Purushottam Ram, it grapples almost continuously with the philosophical substratum which always underpins Hinduism as a religion. In other words, the metaphysics and spirituality of Hinduism is also brought out most beautifully by Tulsidas in his discussion of whether Ram is Nirgun,
Yeah.
without
Awesome.
attribute,
Yeah.
or Sagun, attribute full,
Yeah.
and then enables him, having first bridged this by espousing the Bhakti Marg, the path of devotion, prapatti, surrender, as the only valid, easily accessible, and most efficacious path to salvation. Now, that is Tulsidas' approach. As you know, Hinduism allows you great freedom. Shankaracharya spoke of the Gyan Marg, the Purnima school speak of the Karma Kand, then the whole Bhakti movement starting from about the 11th, 12th century, just decides to pole vault over all these
all the other
philosophical categories and just surrender. So Tulsidas begins with this argument of whether Ram is Nirgun or Sagun. And he himself says, Aguna Saguna Doi Brahma Swarupa. Aguna Saguna Doi Brahma Swarupa Akata Agatha Anadi Anupa. Both of them, both the attributeless Nirguna and the attributeful Sagun, are essentially part of that same Brahma or Brahman as it is written in English. And he repeats this theme on many occasions. For instance, the typical style which
Pavanji, may I just cut in a bit? Perhaps for the audience, I'm sure many of them would know, but if you could clarify the difference between, because they shouldn't confuse it with Brahma. So Brahm and Brahman, if you could just in case some of them, so if you could just clarify that, how that animates, and it's a part of the Hindu tradition.
Very briefly put, there are 6 systems of Hindu philosophy. The Nyaya, the Vaisheshik, the Sankhya Yoga, the Purva-Mimansh, the Uttar-Mimansh. The Uttar-Mimansh is the Advaita school, the non-dual school, which audaciously, as in my Shankaracharya book you would have seen, audaciously propounds not a divinity. None of the schools deal with the divine. They don't talk of God. They can technically be called atheist. They are looking for what is the ultimate truth. And Advaita school says that the ultimate truth is without attributes, a cosmic pulsating consciousness which is within you and outside, and you must understand that that is the real, and therefore you are part of it, which is the Mahavakya of the Upanishad, Tat Tvam Asti. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahm. And what you see as your real world is illusionary only because, not because it doesn't exist. It exists so long as your perspective doesn't change. So long as the moment you realize that it is destructible, it is transient, it is impermanent, it is the prapanch of the mind, the outcome of the ego and of the buddhi, but not of the chitta, the consciousness within you. Then this world exists. The moment you realize this, it goes. So therefore, there is this concept that the ultimate is without attributes, which was called Brahm, or as pronounced in English, Brahman, which is very different from the caste. But then Ramanujam came, and a host of other philosophers who felt that the concept of a God which has no attributes is very distant. It's very dry. You need a God to whom you can go and say, I surrender to you, I want this from you, I am devoted to you, I love you, you need someone to
Again,
identify with.
we should just clarify, this is different from the Ramanujan. This is Ramanujacharya. Yeah.
Ramanujacharya, the philosopher of the 11th century. So here was school Nimbarkar, Ramanuja, who then said, no, that ultimate attributeless pulsating cosmic consciousness exists, but it has powers within it of diversity and therefore can create a sagun version of it, that is a version which has attributes. And that opened the floodgate later to the school of bhakti, because now you had your God. That God represented that cosmic consciousness. You could go to the God and surrender. Now Tulsidas, writing in the 16th century, at the peak of the bhakti movement, he's writing a story, an epic. Valmiki's epic is about Ram, the epic hero, in a war for justice against Ravana. Tulsidas' epic is also that, but Tulsidas, as a proponent of the Bhakti school, is also carrying on a philosophical dialogue, which most people don't know, which you don't see in B.R. Chopra's Ramayan, or you don't see in the Ram Leela done at Dashera. And that dialogue is continuous. He is saying that this division between Nirguna and Sagun doesn't apply to Ram because he represents both. And in language Amish, which can easily relate to the common man, exactly. He says, Phule Kamal, so sar kaisa, the flowering lotus in the still waters of the lake is so beautiful. Phule Kamal, so sar kaisa, Nirguna Brahma Saguna Bane Jaisa. Just as the Nirguna Brahma becomes Sagun, so from the still waters of that cosmic consciousness arises a lotus. And then he says, you don't get into the philosophical quibble. Just surrender to Ram because he represents both the Nirgun and the Sagun. And these are lines, he says, Agun alak aj joi. Aguna arup alak aj joi. Agun without attributes, arup without form, alak aj joi unborn. Aguna arup alak aj joi, bhagati prema bas saguna ho joi. Because of the devotion of the devotee, that remote cosmic consciousness takes on the form of that divine deity who is my personal God to whom I can surrender. And he actually, if you read the exceptionally important philosophical obiter dicta of Tulsidas' Ramcharitmanas, he is saying just surrender. He says, for instance, to just give you one example, and there are so many more. Janani Janak, parents. Bandhu Sutadara, friend, son, wife. Janani Janak, Bandhu Sutadara. Tana Dhana, Bhavana, house. Suhadra, relatives. Parivara. Sabki mamata tag batori. Weave them all into your love for them, weave them into a cord. Sabki mamata tag batori. Mam pad man hi bandha bari dori. At my feet, with complete surrender, just tie them, and you will move towards that peace of mind, the nullification of the ego, the quiescent ability to actually have an insight of that level of consciousness that you aspired. So this is the philosophy that continues with Ram throughout in Tulsidas' Ramcharitmanas.
Payal, I think we're going to need more time because I can keep chatting with Pavanji for long. So,
Because he's more knowledgeable than me on the subject.
no, of course not. But Pavanji, I have a question. Okay, that before one gets deeper into the book, that there is a view, and I think you've said it beautifully, how the path of Gyan Yoga and Bhakti Yoga can find a balance. You clearly, I mean, you're, at least to me, you're more of a follower of Gyan Yoga. And it's not that you're divorced from Bhakti, but
The
you
thing
love
is,
the...
1 second, Amish, I have to stop you. I have to stop you here. The great thing about Hinduism, it's its remarkable ability to assimilate even as it seemingly divides.
Now, you answered my question before I asked it.
Look at this.
It's precisely what I wanted to ask.
Shankaracharya espouses the Gyan Marg.
Correct.
And Shankaracharya writes the most moving stotras of bhakti.
Correct.
Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Mudmate.
Shivananda Rupa.
Yeah, exactly. And Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham is a sign of the sheer iconoclasm of Hinduism, where you can nullify everything that is conventionally believed in a religion and say, I am only bliss. Chid Anand, Chidananda Rupa. I am only bliss and awareness and ultimate blasphemy, because there is no heresy in Hinduism. There is no blasphemy in Hinduism. He says, I am Shiva. I am Shiva. So that is the part. But I'm saying he wrote the most moving stotras. So there is no basic dichotomy between the Gyan Marg, the path of knowledge, and the path of bhakti. My problem, Amish, is how do normal people access an epic like the Ramcharitmanas? I have grown up with parts of it. My parents used to recite it. My mother knew it by heart, although she spoke the Queen's English also. But a lot of the younger people don't know the Ramcharitmanas. And because it is 12,000 lines, I mean over 1,000 stanzas, nobody will read it from page 1 to page end. So my attempt was, just like I tried to make Adi Shankaracharya accessible, was to take some selections from the Ramcharitmanas, which I found the most beautiful, to provide a translation in English and Hindi, and to put a commentary on them so that people can understand the background, the meaning, the context, so that this great epic, this great work of literature, religion, and philosophy becomes accessible to people. That was the purpose.
No, and you've done that so wonderfully. I think even the couplets you picked. So I had one question: that which doha would you think? If I know it's very difficult. It's one because Hinduism doesn't force that you have to pick one. But in case one has to force you, we are algebra out here, so we can do a lot of forcing. So in case one has to force you, if you have to pick one doha, which one would it be?
You see, if you want to, I mean, it's a very difficult question. Amish, only you can ask it. But let me choose a controversial one. And this is Tulsidas describing Sita. And he says, Sundarta kahu sundar kari. Sundarta kahu sundar kari. She makes the beautiful more beautiful. And then look at the poetic imagery. Chabigrah, Deep Shikha, Janubarui. So in a hall of beautiful paintings, it is as though someone just lights a lamp and they come alive. This is what her beauty is like. So this is, I mean, even from the point of view of sheer poetry, just remarkable. Chabi Graha Deep Shikha Janubare. So, I mean, there are many, many, many lines, and you know, my father used to pray every morning, and I used to listen to it just before he went to the office, otherwise wearing a three-piece suit and a tie in the elitist ICS, but he would stand in the puja room and say Jai Ram Ramana Manang Shamanang Bhavatap Bayakul Pahi Janam Avadesha Suresha Ramesha Vabho Sharanangat Mangat Pahi Prabho. Sharanangat Mangat Pahi Prabho. I surrender to thy feet, my Lord. So there are many, many such lines. But and another thing, Tulsidas' Ramcharitmanas differs from Valmiki, and that's the controversial part, because it does not have that Uttarkand, which I know many women hate, which is about the humiliation of Sita. Tulsidas ends with the Abhishek of Ram in Ayodhya.
As a different interpretation of the Agni Pariksha as well.
Yes, there are, and you have written a book on Sita.
So I had one, I have to admit one thing which actually I didn't know of, and I discovered, which was extremely intriguing, that Tulsidas had sent a copy of the manuscript to Todarmal at this time. Interesting, huh? So where did you? What is the source? Very intriguing thing.
No, I'll tell you, there's a reason, and I try and explain it also.
Todarmal, for those who don't know, was a minister in Emperor Akbar's court.
Akbar's court. You see, Akbar, of all the Mughal emperors, and perhaps the only one, partially showed a desire for some degree of religious dialogue between faiths, not merely the one-sided assertion of the superiority of Islam. And in Akbar's time, there was an eclectic milieu in North India, and Tulsidas was contemporaneous. And there was a lot of envy, anger also, against Tulsidas within his own Brahmin community, because instead of writing in Sanskrit, he wrote in Awadhi. So he was afraid of the manuscript. He began writing it in Ayodhya, and after he had written 3 of the Kans or sections, he moved to Varanasi. And he lived to a ripe age of 91 on the banks of the Ganga. Perhaps the water was cleaner then. And then he, in order to safeguard his manuscript, because there were no photocopying machines, he sent one copy done by one of his pupils for safekeeping to Todarmal, who must have been a friend. Actually, Tulsidas's fame in his time was quite phenomenal. I mean, Dr. Vincent Smith has called him a figure greater than Akbar. And the great linguistic Griffith has said, what the greatest figure in India after Buddha himself. So Tulsidas's fame was great, though his enemies were many. And so he sent a copy of the manuscript for safekeeping to Todarmal.
Very interesting. I was also fascinated by another story you speak of his relationship with his wife, which in some ways echoed, the folk traditions that we've heard of Kalidas ji as well. So can you take us through that? How his relationship with his wife was a spur to his greatness?
No, look, it's not the sensual love depicted between Radha and Krishna, which again is a fascinating aspect of Hinduism. For every Radha, there has to be a Sita, and for every Sita, there has to be a Radha. For every playful Leela Purushottam Krishna, there has to be the more stable, more conventional Maryada Purushottam Ram. So it's part of the complexity that Hinduism revels in. But the relationship between Sita and Ram is displayed with exceptional sensitivity by Tulsidas when one of her Sakhi friends asks her, which one of them is Ram, as the 2 brothers are in the bower, in the garden. I mean, and she doesn't even turn, but with just a movement of her eye, she indicates the elder brother. She doesn't even look up towards him. And similarly, at the time of, for instance, the Jaimal, where the bride garlands the bridegroom, and the bridegroom garlands the bride. Sundar Tulsidas uses a line when she's approaching Ram, and this is no love affair that has preceded the marriage, but instant love when they see. And by the way, it's interesting for you as a Shefite. I'm sorry, I digress a little. In order to see that her love for Ram fructifies into a marriage, into union, she goes back and prays. And she prays to Gauri, to Parvati, not to Lakshmi. Jai 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 Giriraj Kishori, Jai Mahesh Mukhchand Chakori, Jai Gajabadana Shananana Mata, Jagat Janani Damani Dutagata. This is her prayer to Parvati. So anyway, as she approaches Ram with the garland, Tulsidas writes, Tan Sako Chuman Parama Uchahu. Her body is shrinking because she is approaching the male, the husband, to be. Out of abashedness, her body is shrinking and her mind is soaring at the fruition of what she had sought, which is union with Lord Ram. So there are so many, and Ram himself, when Sita is abducted by Ravan,
Yes,
again,
yes.
this is the duality of at which Hinduism will treat its own gods. He is God, and he knows that this is happening. And yet Tulsidas describes him as a human being completely bereft, in grief, in sorrow. He and Lakshman are in the forest, it's raining, the clouds are, there's thunder of clouds, and he tells Lakshman, Ghan gamand, dhana gamand, garjat gora, priya heen dar pat manamora. Without my beloved, I feel afraid. This is God saying to his brother. So it's shown in a very beautiful way, the relationship, but in a very conventional way. Radha and Krishna in lore and in the Bhagavad Puran, the Vishnu Puran and the Isha Puran. I mean, the Harivamsh, sorry. They are, first of all, let me say Radha doesn't exist. Radha does not exist until Jayadev in Geet Govind invents it. Until then, Krishna, because Krishna is Krishna, he does the frolicking with the gopis in the beautiful circular Ras Leela on the banks of the Yamuna, but the gopis are anonymous. And by his mystical powers, he makes each of them feel that she is alone with him. That Krishna can do. That's the job of Krishna, not the job of Ram. And Jayadev creates Radha as the foil to the sensual energy of Krishna. If he is Shringar Murtimam, the very embodiment of the sensual mood, she is Raseshwari, the very embodiment also of that mood. So he creates Radha. So that's another story. But without the sensuality which Krishna effortlessly portrays, here there is the pursuit of love within the framework of the permissible, but not the less passionate for it.
Correct, correct.
Amish,
Payal, how much time do I have? Are we? Can I ask one more question, or?
Yeah. So if we could take a last question, move to
Okay.
audience, and then we'll. Yeah.
All right. Last, very quick question. Then, one of the things you get across so beautifully when you cover many of the dohas, can you take us through the importance of the meter in Indian texts? Like the original Ramayan had the Anushtuk meter. So take us through the meter out here. Why is it so important in our text that there has to be a meter?
I think because the chopais, the sorats, the chopai in particular sits so easily on the tongue. Ab dekhiye, the way, the chopai, because it's like, even if he says, Jati pati kul dharma badhai. Now, I'm just saying how rhyme and meter is done. And by the way, this is about caste in the context of bhakti. He says, Jati Pati, Kula, which kul you belong to, Dharam, which religion, Badhai, how important you are, Jati Pati, Kul, Dharma, Badhai, Dhana, Bal, Parajan, Gun, Chaturai. All of this is of no matter. Bhagati heen, the person who does not have bhakti in him. Bhagati heen nar sohiye kaise bin jal barid dekhiye jaise. Now it just sits on your tongue. A person who does not have bhakti within him is like that cloud which does not have the capacity to rain. So I'm saying these chopas sit easily. And the nuggets of wisdom, last doha I'm going to tell you, he says, and this is very relevant, Payal, for our times. For instance, it's full of the nuggets of wisdom. Nahi kau as janma jag mahi, prabhuta pai jahi mad nahi. No one yet has been born in this world who does not get pride when power comes. Or he will say, relevant to our times, Sachiv Vaid Gur. Kon? Sachiv, secretary, Vaid, doctor, and Guru. Tino jo. Priya bolahi bhai as. Who speak what the kings want, who speak what the king wants out of either fear or expectation. Sachiv Vaid Gur. Tino jo. Priya bolehi bhai as. Now what's the consequence? Raj dharma tan tino so. Hoi begahi nas. Both Raj and Dharam and your body are speedily going to be destroyed if these three speak only out of fear or expectation. And if you ask me what is the most brilliant line of Tulsidas on philosophy, it's just one line. He is asked, Lakshman asks Ram to explain what is Maya. And there's one line only, Tulsidas. Look at the brilliance of composition. He says, Mai arumor tor te Maya. The notion of I, my, arumor, and mine, and yours is Maya. Just one line. Mai arumor tor te Maya.
Beautiful. Guys, for everyone, this is a wonderful way to get introduced into this wonderful text of the Ramcharitmanas, which carries our philosophies, our traditions. I think Pavanji has done a brilliant job. Do check it out. And Payal, up to you now.
Just, we do have a few questions, and a couple of them I'm going to address because they're clearly addressed to both of you. But the first question, Pavanji, aapko, it says, and this is Gayatri Lamba, she wants to know, why, in your opinion, does the Ramcharitmanas stop at the coronation of Lord Ram? Why does it not address the story after, and what happened to Sita?
You see, because there is an opinion among scholars that in Valmiki's Ramayan, the Uttarakhand was a later addition done to represent the dominant social biases of that period, which was a patriarchal society, male dominated, where women had to conform to a certain stereotypical profile as expected from them. So there is also, it's not clear whether Valmiki's Ramayan, the original, also had the Uttar Ramayan. The second thing is, Tulsidas reveres Ram and Sita. In fact, he has said that he has described the three of them walking in the forest, Ram, Sita, Lakshman, in line. He says, Brahm, Maya, Jeev. She is like Maya between Brahm, that all-pervasive cosmic consciousness, and Jeev, the individual. And Maya, coincidentally, is not merely illusion or ignorance. Maya is the Shakti within Brahm to create and is a goddess. So he reveres Sita and he would rather end it with the Abhishek and the return to Ayodhya than to get any controversies about her with the Uttarkand.
And I think, and it is another question from Gayatri, because she's clearly, she says, in fact, that she's very both hurt and moved by this very issue, which is an issue that has always disturbed me deeply, is how the Maryada Purushottam could cast off his pregnant wife, who had been with him through all his travails, on the word of one person. Was it leading by example, or was it, sorry, I have to say it, political expediency? It hurts my soul to think of it. And I think here she epitomizes the question which really comes to say that did the Maryada Purushottam let women down? Not just his wife, but did he let women down?
I think that if Gayatri is seized with very legitimate questions on the approach in Tulsidas, in Valmiki's Ramayan of Ram to women, she can look at it in two ways. One, that it was probably, as many scholars believe, not a part of the original Ramayan and was added later, because texts grow over periods of time and are contextualized by the prevailing social biases. But if she is hurt by that, don't read the Valmiki Ramayan. Read Tulsidas' Ramcharitmanas and you will see, apart from the odd line somewhere or the other, which people constantly quote, the devotion with which both he looks upon Sita, the relationship between Ram and Sita, and there are many other passages, including the encounter with Shabri.
So I think there's another question anonymously asked because somebody hasn't put their name, but it's interesting. And it's again posed this one to both of you, saying that does the figure of, I think, Amish, because of your last book on Ravan, and saying that the grays in a character like Ravan, in fact, compel us to look at the idea of ourselves and everything far more deeply, rather than, you almost write off Lord Ram as, because he's Maryada Purushottam, he almost has nothing to teach you because he's too perfect, right? In that sense, for one, do you find the character of Ravan more intriguing than Ram? Is the question to both of you. Secondly, it says, are there philosophical or conceptual challenges that the idea or the figure of Lord Ram poses to both of you? Does he also represent some kind of challenges for you philosophically or in areas of grey?
Amish can
love to answer this question, but this is Pavanji's event, so I'm going to sit and listen to Pavanji. No, you should answer.
No, I will not answer because I know what an authority on Ravan you are. I just want to say that again, as per Hindu dharma, not religion, but ethics, there is nothing as absolutely bad and absolutely right. And this is not moral relativism. This is about the fact that man-made laws and customs vary from place to place, and therefore they need to be seen contextually rather than in absolute ways. They vary according to religion, they vary according to social usage and custom. So Hinduism allows for that relativism, which is not unethical, but which is pragmatic, to judge what is right and wrong by human standards, while also essaying some absolute virtues, but they are all related to achieving that stillness of mind and possible moksha. They are not related to ethics per se. So Ravan is not necessarily bad, and Amish will speak about it. Ravan, when he dies, the heavens rain down flowers on him. When Duryodhan dies in the Mahabharata, which in Mahabharata is much more a book about right and wrong and the different aspects of it. Duryodhan, flowers rain down on him, and Yudhishthir finds Duryodhan happily luxuriating in heaven, the arch evil of the Mahabharata, while his own brother and wife are in hell. So this is part of Hinduism. You have to understand its ethics. One thing I find, and I'll give it over to Amish, one thing I find is that many of the reactions of Ram as Maryada Purushottam perhaps are difficult to understand in today's context. Here is Kaikeyi conspiring on the evil advice of Manthara to use an unsuspecting Dashrath to have Ram banished for 14 years. But he goes to meet Kaikeyi. And in today's context, you would protest, you would say, you would fight, you would seek justice. And what does he say? And that's why, for conventionally, he's Maryada Purushottam Ram. He says, Sun Janani, Soi Sut Bada Bhagi, Jo Pitubat Bachan Anuragi. Listen, mother, that child is blessed who can, with love, obey his or her parents. Now this can perplex me. It sometimes perplexes me. Does Maryada Purushottam mean that you adjust to what you believe is wrong merely in order to preserve what is correct behavior? Now these are questions, but see it in the context of an epic story. Sorry, Amish, I'm taking your time. Please go ahead on Ravan.
I was fascinated by. Are you sure you want me to answer? It's not my event. So
no, Ravan, you must.
Okay, I think I think Pavanji alluded to it very well. The difference between say the ancient religions like Hinduism as compared to the more modern religions is it's not prescriptive. It doesn't treat you like a child. It actually treats you like an adult. So it doesn't say you have to do these 10 things, otherwise you'll go to hell. Because then you're treating the followers of that religion as children. You don't have the brains to think for yourself. Do these 10 things. Hinduism actually treats you like an adult, right? And therefore, in our traditional gurukuls and everywhere, one of the first, besides of course maths and standard things that was taught, one of the key things that was taught was viveka. As Pavanji was saying, the ability to understand the context. Okay, and because only when you understand the context can you actually understand what laws would work then, what archetypes you should follow, right? So, for example, in the context of all of us being private citizens, we have no right to take the law into our own hands and commit acts of violence. There are protests that have taken place recently. They have every right to protest. They have no right to take the law into their own hands and hit people or carry out acts of violence. That's understanding the context. So in that context, ahimsa paramo dharma makes sense. That non-violence is the greatest dharma. But in the context of a soldier standing at the border, in that context, ahimsa paramo dharma does not make sense. Because in that context, the soldier's dharma is to fight. Right? That's his job. His or her job, because their job is to protect those who depend on their protection. That is their dharma. So in that context, dharma hinsa tathevcha, not ahimsa paramo dharma. So the key thing you have to understand in the Hindu way, it treats you like an adult, so you must understand context. So even gods and goddesses don't come and judge you. They are there as archetypes. So don't waste your time judging, learn from them own life, because the only thing in the universe under your control is your own karma. Someone else's karma is not in your control, so why waste your time trying to judge it, right? Learn from others and apply in your own life. That is the perspective of Hinduism. So therefore, look at law. Sorry?
That is called swadharma.
Exactly. So you understand your own swadharma, and then you're supposed to understand from our gods and goddesses as archetypes. As Lord Ram as the archetype of the Maryada Purushottam, the ideal follower of laws. Lord Krishna is another archetype. And you learn from them and apply that in your own life. And the only way you can do that is if you understand Viveka, the ability. That is, in the Indian mind, that is becoming an adult, understanding the context, right? Because in our philosophies, you're not treated as a child who needs to be told what to do. You're told various options, various archetypes. Now make up your own mind and live with the consequences, positive or negative.
Sure. Okay. Two more questions I think we'll take before we close. Aisha Mehta Pavanji wants to know, how important were the other brothers according to Tulsidas Ramcharitmanas? They're not spoken about much, but each seems to have had an important role. Did each have an important role? Could you just give us a little bit of context about that?
I'm afraid not. Valmiki ji devotes even very little space to Sita herself in the Valmiki Ramayana. Tulsidas corrects it by devoting a much more space to Sita in the Ramcharitmanas. And of course, there is space for Lakshman and Bharat. But Shatrughan and, they don't figure, they don't figure in the Ramcharitmanas.
Okay, and Arun Gandhi wants to know, is it more about the journey? Is it about the journey? Sorry, let me just, is it about the journey about becoming the 14 years rather than about being a god? Is it about becoming? I think he means both becoming a god and just his own becoming rather than about being a god.
You see, first of all, for the believer, Ram cannot become because he is being. He is. And this is just a leela, an act or play to demonstrate some virtues which he does for the believer. So there is no further becoming. He is. For others, every enactment of a story is a means by which you probably evolve further. And in that sense, when you see Ram as a human character, going through the vicissitudes of exile, of suffering, but even there, philosophy comes in. Here is the boatman telling Lakshman that, here you are from the royal palace, you are sleeping on the ground. I feel very, very sad and I hurt at your plight. And Lakshman becomes philosophical. Lakshman, the anger of Ram, always springing to his defense. Tulsidas suddenly makes him philosophical and he says, Kahun koi sukh dukh ka data, nij krit karam bhoge sab bhrata. Nobody gives to anybody sorrow or joy. Each of us only reap the fruits of our karma. So it's a journey. Naturally, it's a philosophical journey also. But if you view, and that's why I'm sometimes against the use of the word mythology, which Western academics use for people whom we consider divine. Nobody says Christ is mythology. But Ram, for a great number of believers in this country, is divine. And therefore, he was always what he is, rather than becoming further anything.
I think pretty much all we have time for. There was one clarification that somebody wanted to know, which is you mentioned in the beginning how old a language Maithili is. Could you just tell us that again, if somebody missed that?
No. All these languages are derivatives of Sanskrit. By the way, the last that came was Khadi Boli or Hindi.
Correct. Yeah.
All of these languages are derivatives of Sanskrit as used locally by people, and this includes Maithili, this includes Bengali, this includes Braj, this includes Awadhi, and at least most of the languages in the subcontinent.
Okay, I think we'll close. I have a last question for you, and that really is tying in very much this moment with the past. I think we have a sense of how Ravan might deal with China. How do you think Lord Ram might have dealt with China?
I'm a diplomat. I can't say anything. Ex-diplomat, Pavanji.
Very much for Pavanji.
I would think that Ravan and Ram, with a common enemy, would meet in a parley to discuss what should be the best strategy and jointly chart it out, as I think some of India's political parties should be doing today.
Spoken not like a former diplomat, but like an eternal diplomat. But thank you both of you. Thank you, Pavan, for sharing. Like I said, it's a tip of the iceberg, these conversations. They can only...
I know, Amish and I can keep talking for 2-3 hours.
But
without knowing time flies.
So thank you, Pavan, for taking the time. And I hope, like I said, very few people have been as productive, not just with non-lockdown time, but with lockdown time as well. Thank you so much for all the work. Thank you, Amish. I know, like I said, it's in the middle of a workday for you, different time zone. Thank you for joining us and for hosting the conversation. It's an absolute pleasure. We'll see all of the Algebra members back. You'll hear from us, but we'll see you back on Saturday next, which is the 4th of July. Thank you, and have a good evening, everybody. Have a good weekend.